Dr. Valenzuela for collaborating with us and for being here today. I just wanted to welcome you all and appreciate your presence, and also to thank Dr. Delgado, Rocio Delgado, for organizing this amazing Alvarez seminar. It has been a pleasure to work with you as always. And for all the students that have been present, and all our colleagues that have also been here with us. So sin más, I'm just gonna pass the torch to Dr. Rocio Delgado so she can frame the last event and also present our moderator.
Yes, hold on, there's a lot of feedback. Give me just a second. I'm so sorry about that. Can everyone hear me better? No feedback now? Okay, we're in class and we transition from class to this lecture. So thank you everyone for your patience. Like Dania Abreu Torres, Dr. Abreu Torres said, this is the third of our lecture series from Mexico, Americas, and Spain. And I am honored to have Dr. Valenzuela virtually join us here at Trinity University. Dr. Valenzuela, para cerrar con broche de oro, we've had amazing speakers. We had Dr. Urrieta from UT, we had Dr. Jose Medina, and we've had wonderful speakers that have talked to us about the importance of building on the strengths of our Latinx youth. And I thank you for cerrar con broche de oro. You're putting the big red bow, golden bow on the series, because you are someone who continue to inspire generations of educators, scholars, and activists. I had Dr. Valenzuela as a guest speaker in one of my graduate courses at the University of Texas at Austin. And I read your book on subtractive schooling. And that's a book that I've shared with many of my students, including Dianita, who is going to be introducing you and who will be joining the Department of Education at UT. So thank you again for being here. And I will pass it on to you, Diana.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our last speaker of the 2021 Mas Alvarez Seminar Series, Dr. Ángela Valenzuela. Dr. Valenzuela is an exemplar scholar and professor in both the Educational Policy and Planning program within the Department of Educational Administration at the University of Texas at Austin. She holds a courtesy appointment in the Cultural Studies and Education program within the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. She also served as the director of the University of Texas Center for Education Policy. Dr. Valenzuela earned her bachelor's degree in English from Angelo State University. She earned her master's degree in sociolinguistics from the University of Texas at Austin, and her master's and Ph.D. in sociology from Stanford University. Her previous teaching positions were in sociology at Rice University, as well as a visiting scholar at the Center for Mexican American Studies at the University of Houston. A Fulbright scholar, Dr. Valenzuela spent her 2007 to 2008 academic year in Mexico, where she taught in the College of Law at the University of Guanajuato, and conducted research in the areas of immigration, human rights, and binational relations. Her research and teaching interests are in sociology of education, race and ethnicity in schools, urban education reform, educational policy, and immigrant youth in schools. Dr. Valenzuela also directs the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project that aims to create a teacher education pathway for Latina youth nationally. Locally, she directs Academia Coahuitli, a partnership-based community-anchored Saturday school with district-wide impacts in Austin, Texas. And she was recently inducted into the 2021 cohort of the National Academy of Education. Please help me extend a virtual warm welcome to Dr. Ángela Valenzuela.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Diana. You're going to be my colleague, huh?
Yes, I'm so excited.
I think we were supposed to meet and it didn't happen. I'm so sorry. I just I can't remember what got in the way, but muy bienvenida. It's so wonderful. Y gracias, Dr. Delgado, Dr. Abreu Torres, Enrique Alemán. I've got so many friends here to acknowledge. Antonia Arturo, Rita, let me see, Lucero, we testified today. Imelda, we worked together. So anyway, it's so nice to be here among friends. I really just celebrate and honor this opportunity. I'm so happy that I can share our work, and I wanted to share my screen to get started here. It's my PowerPoint, and I've been thinking a lot about this. The idea that it's important to be creators, right? Oftentimes we're in these institutions and we're just sort of like receiving our instructions from them and we're not creating, right? And I think that's more the case than not. And we think that that's really our job when so much of the time it's the job we've been told that we have, right? And so much of what has inspired our work has been just this vision for our community of social justice. And so the title of my talk is Escuelita Pedagogies and Growing Critical Practice Teachers. We need escuelitas everywhere. And I hope that by the end of the talk, this will be apparent to you. And so I will be talking about our Academia Cuautli. Let me see. How do I advance this?
She's having problems too.
Maybe this way. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. So I just want to begin with the land acknowledgement that we're meeting on indigenous land. We'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the Carrizo and Comecrudo, Coahuilteca and Caddo, Tonkawa, the Comanche, Lipanapache, Alabama Coshara, Kickapoo, Tigua Pueblo, and all the American Indian and indigenous people and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas, here on Turtle Island. As I thought and prayed about this presentation, I thought about this land acknowledgement that a lot of us have in our syllabi now as a prayer, right? It's una esperanza. Es una oración. It's un rezo. We're trying to like give back with our soul, bodies, and minds, our learnings and our teachings in a way that will benefit the next generation. And in the spirit of heart, body, and mind, I'm so grateful to Dr. Linda McNeil. I want to dedicate this lecture to her. She passed away last week. We all have those people in our lives that were there just at the right time to just save us sometimes from real despair. And she was there at Rice University when I got denied tenure, and when other people were not there to be in solidarity with me. She, in the Center for Education, not in my department, I was in sociology, was there all the way. I mean, she was also with our community and had been a staunch colleague in the struggle against high stakes testing, which is something that we're still involved in. We're now 20 years at least into this, and Dr. McNeil's research, her wisdom, her vision, her soul was significant and will continue to be significant. So what I want to do today is define ethnic studies, the ethnic studies movement, comment on what the research says, then hone in on Academia Cuautli. It means Eagle Academy. It's our escuelita, again, with the idea of encouraging escuelitas and for folks there to think about it as an idea. Maybe you have one. I know that it's part of our history. You know this, it's part of our history. It inspires, it speaks to us. And so what we're doing with our escuelita is we are responding, as it turns out, to some concerns raised by a scholar who I respect a lot, Ken Zeichner, in education, and we respond to critical issues in clinical teacher education that I'll come to in a minute. And that's really really pleasing and fun to me to think that that's what we're doing. What he says we need to do is what we're doing. The components of our escuelita, and that I think would be components of any escuelita, would be curriculum, pedagogy, and structure. So taken together, what we're calling for is a new social architecture for public education. We work in silos, not only just as scholars, individuals, and researchers, but even as institutions. Our universities often work independently of our school districts and our schools work independently of our local institutions. And it explains, I believe, why we're in the crisis that we're in. It is important to define this crisis, and he calls them critical, unresolved, and understudied issues in clinical teacher education. And so what he calls out is that, and he's coming from the perspective of people that prepare teachers in education, that there's very little community engaged CTE. Genuine community voice and expertise is lacking. I mean, isn't that just what is? Isn't that what we just all know and experience to be true? There's a lack of genuine partnerships where partnerships share equal status, but are also of high epistemic quality. I love that he uses this word, epistemology. Epistemology refers to ways of knowing, and how again we're taught to know in ways that are often very kind of technical and sterile and objectifying, right? When we think of today's a lot of students were taking the TOS test or TOX test, and I mean that's an objectifying way of knowing children. I hear that the 4th grade system came down. Lucero was telling me, so that's kind of interesting. And so they're going to have to take the test again. Although, if you're listening to this and you're a parent, your kid does not have to take the test, okay? Although at the high school level, I mean, you might want to, but at the other grades, no. K through 8, it's just a bunch of really, nonsense and bad data. And on top of that, it's really harmful to be testing children in an academic, to really reinscribing hierarchy, which is a way of knowing, right? And so the kind of epistemic quality that Zeichner and that we talk about is one where notions of democracy and empowerment, they're authentic kinds of terms. I mean, they're embodied, they're lived, they're shared, and it's the antithesis of situations where there are smoke screens, right? They're actually like nice words that we use to hide our hegemony as people in the university. And oftentimes we, and I'm speaking very generally, I'm not speaking about anyone in particular, but I think oftentimes we enter spaces where we're the ones that act like we know it all, when epistemically we should be open and open-minded and curious and think of other ways of knowing that are nurturing and life-giving. There's also the low status of CTE and mentor teachers. What you have in colleges of education is a system where it's either adjunct faculty, maybe graduate students, or clinical faculty that are the ones doing the field experiences with the students. And as people that are in colleges of education and that are on the tenure track or that are tenured, the reward system doesn't work typically in that direction. There are exceptions, but that's what we tend to see. Defining ethnic studies. So I'm going to pivot, and I won't spend a lot of time because I do want to spend most of the time on our escuelita, but we are in a moment right now. It's an inflection point. You hear that on the news? I hear it all the time. It's an inflection point, and ethnic studies is part of that inflection point. Where the institutions we had before are all of a sudden not necessarily ones that we have to hold on to, but what I like to think that the moment that we're in is also the result of people here on this Zoom meeting that are that have dedicated their lives to cultivating a critical consciousness in the next generation, K through 12, higher ed. And so I think we need to take credit for the partial credit for the racial justice movement that we're in. And so, I mean, this is a legacy agenda, ethnic studies. We testified on it today, House Bill 1504, an ethnic studies bill with Christina Morales, representative out of Houston. We're fighting for our children to be respected, to be included in state curriculum. What's so hard about that, right? And if we think of Chicana, Mexicano, Chicano studies, I mean, if we go to the heart of it, a lot of it has been about knowing our indigenous epistemologies and ways of knowing and being in the world. And what House Bill 1504 does is it allows ethnic studies courses to count toward high school graduation. It's really exciting. It's really, really exciting. And so I encourage you to familiarize yourself with that bill and that agenda. So it's important to have a common vocabulary. Ethnic studies is an umbrella for fields of study, right? And this isn't exhaustive, but it's, you know, it's a good list, and it's a discrete list, right? It's African American studies, Puerto Rican studies, Native American studies, Dominican studies, Central American studies, women and gender studies, LGBTQ studies, Asian American studies. They're located typically in the liberal arts and humanities or the social sciences. When we're talking about, for example, ethnomathematics or ethno-environmental sciences. If you don't know about the Nepoaltzitzin Mayan mathematics that makes use of the Mayan abacus, that's really an exciting direction that our colleagues at UTSA, Lorena Claes, Dr. Claes, and Dr. Flores have been leading on for some time now. I'm trying hard to bring it to Austin. I really hope that we can get the NEPO. We do have like a little NEPO club, but without the real epistemological Mayan indigenous components to it. So what is what we've all known, or pretty much all of us, you know, because we've been part of this discourse community, is that multicultural education is the earlier name for what today we're calling ethnic studies, multicultural ed at the K-12 level. The approaches that exist are infusion. So that would be infusing ethnic studies into a social studies curriculum, for example, or into, you know, it could be into a fine arts curriculum. It could be into any curriculum. That would be an infusion, but it's basically still a social studies course or a fine arts course, as the case may be. And another is comparative thematic, where you have a curriculum that might align to the ethnic studies heritage months. I mean, it could. That's the curriculum that I was a part of in devising for the Austin Independent School District that we won, actually. Those of us involved in the community in nuestro Grupo that organizes the activities of Academia Cuautli. I'll get to that in a little bit, but this was before the state policy had passed, and we were able to get this curriculum passed, and it's a solid curriculum. It's very good. A lot of work went into this, and so it does align to the different ethnic heritage months, and covers the four major ethnic groups: the African American, Native American, Asian American, and Mexican American. And then you have the single group studies that align to fields of study. That's what House Bill 1504 is calling for, single group studies. And from a political standpoint, that's been a very, very positive direction to go down, because it aligns to us, right? Because we're in Mexican American studies, we're in Native American studies, we're, you know, in these areas of the university that are fields of study that are 40, 50 years old at least, and that have devised a lot of knowledge, right? A lot of research has gone into this, and it's really nice to be able to connect that to, you know, connect that research to what happens in K-12 schools. That's what happened in Arizona. That's what helps to make ethnic studies strong, is that university connection, that university connection. I know Imelda is on the call. Imelda Cortez, she has an Escuelita Huitzilopochtli, and so she herself is drawing those connections in her work and in what she's learning at the university and what she's learning in the community, and then the other direction, right? It's a reciprocal relationship, and that's really powerful. They both mutually inform the other. So I was an expert witness in the court case in Arizona, and I think these are, I mean, among the major kinds of publications that were influential in ultimately a positive decision. There were 3 expert witnesses. I was, there with Stephen Pitti and Nolan Cabrera, and I was addressing the curriculum component. And this is the research that was very influential in convincing, I'm confident, convincing the Judge Wallace Tashima, that this isn't smoke and mirrors, that this is very serious work and a very serious application of theory to the classroom. What was mentioned earlier, Diana Long, in my introduction, was NELREP, and that's a national organization, the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project. And our key initiative has been creating educator pathways into the university. And I mean, that is what that is like creating a passage into, for example, the University of Texas or in UT San Antonio, from maybe the paraprofessional community, the paraprofessional route, the teachers' aides in the schools, and they're already with the kids and they're not going to go anywhere. They're in their communities. That's a really excellent kind of pathway. Another really great pathway are maybe students in the early college career, high schools that they are selecting teaching as a career. Maybe they belong to Future Teachers of America. And then what you do is you coordinate, you create a pathway that might involve the community college and then, the 4-year university where they can get certified. So that's what we've been trying to build here. There's a lot of art to this, and I think more art than science, and politics, of course. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, it's just a really big undertaking, but I think it's essential in the way that Zeichner mentions, and that certainly resonates for us. I mean, we need to be connected, partnered with members of our community, our parents. We need to be social justice oriented, culturally sustaining, critical, right? I mean, we think about critical in terms of some of what was testified today, Maria Unda, who works closely with us at Academia Cuautli, that why is it that I can't be who I am and love who I am, the color of my skin, because I'm being told that I'm less than all the time. And then I'm not given an analysis for understanding why I'm being viewed as less than. I mean, that's powerful, right? And so, I mean, we should, from an education, not when you get in college, but very early on, understand why things are as they are, and that we can change them. We can be agents of change while holding on, right, to to our identities. Someday this will all just be called a good education. Someday in the future, maybe, hopefully, I hope that we will just be I mean, we will see ourselves in each other, and we will have no differences. We will have no hierarchies, right? I mean, I am you, you are me, we are one, right? And when we are one with the earth as well. But we're so far from that consciousness, yet we feel that we are embarked through our praxis in that very direction. So growing critically conscious teachers means in NELREP, means institutionalizing ethnic studies for higher education teacher preparation. I am aware that Dr. Patricia Saldana is working on a certificate, and there's work being done in the Valley. I mean, y'all should join the Knox Tejas Foco K-12 committee, we're amazing, we're extraordinary, and we're the ones that are advocating. We had a really wonderful, I'm showcasing here that we had a really great summit last year, Indigeneity in the K-12 curriculum, we being NELRAP. It was here in Austin, Texas, and we did have folks from San Antonio join us. It was exquisite. So I want to talk about beginnings. I hope the wind isn't too loud here. I want to talk about beginnings. Like, how did all of this stuff get started? And that way I can start talking about Academia Cuautli, our escuelita. And so we got started on September 20th, 2013. And what happened was Armando Rendon came into town. He made a presentation, I'm aware, in San Antonio as well. We brought him with Oralia Garza de Cortez, who you see below. She's a children's book advocate. They exist. We brought them together with historians, with bilingual dual language teachers, with people at the Mexican American Culture Center, with advocates, elders. And so what we did was we had a conversation. This was the flyer that went out, and it was really open-ended. We were concerned about the role of representation and underrepresentation in the curriculum and children's textbooks. And that's still a massive issue. But at that point, it was a very goal-oriented conversation of, well, what can we do about this? And a lot of people right now, incidentally, in the social justice movement, are asking, well, what do I do? What do I do? Well, I think you determine, like, somewhere where you want to make a difference in the world, right? And this is what we did here. We had a meeting at the Mexican American Culture Center. We determined in that meeting different sites of intervention. And so here you see the list of, like, what do we take on, right? Do we take on the local school district? How about the State Board of Education? And of course, we have done that. What about Austin Public Libraries? And we talked about East versus West Austin libraries, and there's inequities in that regard. The publishing industry itself is not attuned to our community. They don't even have a sense that we read sometimes, it seems. Even the books that are in Spanish use Spanish that's not from here, from Texas, and even the palette is off. Like, the color scheme is not from, it's not the landscape of our of Texas or the Southwest, places where we live. And so that it still feels objectifying. It still feels like we're a client, like we're really not in control of our own destinies, right? So the last one was developing a Saturday school at the MAC. And that was Marta Gotera, Emilio Zamora, who pushed for that. They said, we need to do this because the Mexican American Culture Center, in its originating papers, suggested that we should do this. And this is just a quick graph from the children's book initiative out of Wisconsin. And what you see is that out of 5,000 books that they review, they're so wonderful, annually, children's books and young adult books. When you look at the numbers and percents, it's any year over a 30-year time period. It's really horrible. You don't see more than 5% of texts written either by Latinos and other groups or about on Latinos and other groups. It's systemic. It's a problem. And we decided to birth our community-based organization. We have a lot of photos. This is just one of many photos, and people cycle in and out. But we established a group called Nuestro Grupo. We were so busy getting organized, like just really thinking about curriculum, and we would just call ourselves Nuestro Grupo, vamos a reunir Nuestro Grupo. And so we just ended up keeping the name, pretty nondescript. And so what Nuestro Grupo did was by 2014, we inaugurated. We had a beautiful ceremony, press conference. Our vision statement is to honor our community's cultural heritage, to foster a social justice consciousness, and reclaim our collective identities in pursuit of educational freedom. So I'm going to show you a 2-minute video. I think I have a sound option, don't I, to make sure that you hear it? Oops. I think I'll get lost at this point, but let's see what happens.
This news segment from KLRU brought to you by Texas Mutual Insurance.
Are you not hearing this?
For the most part, children in our public schools, and this isn't unique to Austin, they are not getting a curriculum that responds to their culture, their identities, their communities in ways that affirm who they are. Children that come to Academia Quality have an opportunity to learn these things and learn that they're not marginal, that they're actually members of communities that have roots that go all the way back to the original inhabitants of this continent. The idea was to really build on the district's current efforts. The Austin Independent School District has 60 plus schools that teach dual language, but there's really not enough
Dr. Valenzuela, we can't see the actual video.
Yeah, I think I'll just have to leave it at that. I'm sorry. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. I think that hopefully it gives you like at least the feel of a community that came together to address a need. The idea of the eagle came into focus for us through Maestra Tupina. Maestra Tupina Yatonal Cuautli, and with the idea that what we want to have are the attributes of the eagle, right? The eagle has this 360-degree vision, and so that's the analysis, right, that I talked about earlier. And you can't really be strategic. You can't be involved in policy unless you have that analysis. The other important part of the eagle is the idea of resurrection and revival. We don't want to be necessarily like a bilingual program. This wasn't that. This was really a cultural revitalization program. And we knew that if we weren't ourselves revitalized, that we wouldn't have students that are revitalized. And so the idea was to really discover that within ourselves. This idea of renewal. Don't we all want renewal? Doesn't the world hunger for renewal? Mother Earth hungers for renewal. So the key components, I'll get into that, the curriculum, the pedagogy, and the structure. We have this curriculum, it's organic. Organic's a good word. We like to shop organic. Well, we should think organic. Yeah, escuelitas are organic in our history. We have a civil rights focus, cultural arts, how to defend yourself against discrimination. And we came into existence with just all the problems of gentrification, of ICE raiding our community, and then more recently, the pandemic, and then the winter storm. It's been incredible to be part of this throughout this whole process with our parents and our children and our teachers. It's been quite a journey. And there's a lot of us involved. Dr. Chris Milk, from Texas State University, works very closely with the teachers. We have our staff, our aides, we've got our partnerships. But this is the curriculum, and it's always expanding. Indigenous heritage, Danza Mexica is just such a beautiful part of that. We see ourselves as re-indigenizing, as Mexicanos, as Chicanos, Chicanas, re-indigenizing, right? Just that's complicated. We all know that's complicated, but we have embraced the complexity. We've embraced it, and we had Rosa Tupina, who said that she could teach, and she's a wonderful teacher, teach our children, and then to have the danza as part of that. We didn't know if the family or the community would like that. We just didn't know, but it turns out that that's what they really, really like. It turns out that it speaks to them, it resonates. On top of the magnificent teachers, the wonderful teachers that we also have that teach so wonderfully, all the units that we have. I'm in policy, and one of the things that was kind of a question mark was, like how are we going to make big systemic changes? And that's always been a concern. And now I've learned that the important part of policy is not just going and testifying on a bill, but really creating the constituency for change, right? The constituency, the groups, the people that will advocate. So that's really important. And it's also grounded in the living, breathing experience of working with children, teachers, and families. So that it's not theory in a vacuum, but it's a theory in the flesh, like Sherry Moraga, Ida Hurtado, and others advocate, right, have said. The key components of our pedagogy, the pedagogy is so interesting because we do advocate for a curriculum, and people are advocating for, inclusion in Texas, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, I mean, all over. But I think what we really need to do is also step back from that, and think about, very, very strongly about the pedagogical components, because that's where you get at the heart and soul of ethnic studies, and it's the values, right? This is very values based, and it's democratic, and in the truest sense, we're focusing on the identities of children. I mentioned indigeneity and re-indigenizing. Relationality is huge for us. Parent engagement it's that's also been a journey. We've gotten very close to our parents with the crisis that we had with the winter storm. We had to create a consejo, right? Like, what do we do? How can we how can we be helpful? And so it's been very, very, very granular, very interpersonal. We feel what they feel, and they feel what we feel, and it's just so beautiful to be, living with them, conviviendo con ellos. The late Ruth de la Trinidad, she has this idea of convivencia in her book, and we've taken that up. And so we don't have gatherings anymore. We have convivios, and what we have is not teacher professional development. We have platicas, and so language and culture becomes a way through which we can really ground this in our experiences while decolonizing ourselves, right? Generational consciousness, ancestral memory. We think very clearly that this is for the next generation. I mean, we're doing it for the children, and it nurtures us to do that. So what we didn't have, so many of us, if any of us on this call, on this Zoom conversation. It's about authoring ourselves. It's always about voice and advocacy. It's not like Ematenayuka. You can't just see injustice. You have to do something about it, right? And so that's a really important lesson. I'll come back to that at the end. It's about an elder epistemology, right? I mean, we have to acknowledge our elders and respect them and give them time. And they have wisdom to share, and they represent the struggle. They embody the struggle of which we are a part. And so, you develop, and this is what Zeichner says, you develop these identities that are very unique. They would be different across spaces because they're organic, right? Even if we share generally a culture, they would be nuanced and different and organic, unique to place. In terms of the structure, I did say at the beginning that what we need is a new social architecture, right? And I'm not talking about buildings necessarily, but a new social architecture, new ways of relating, so that we can, which is what Zeichner is advocating for, which is really, bringing in communities in authentic ways where they're not second-class citizens, but they're actually informing the pedagogy and the curriculum. And so the parents tell us what they like for us to teach. They like for us to reinforce their values, among other things, and that's what our curriculum does. And it emphasizes to the students in front of the parents. By the way, I have to tell you, throughout this entire period, we're not just doing this and offering the instruction, whether it's in person or online, to the children, but the parents are right there side by side, and they're part of the process. They were very important to the curanderismo, the healing, the healing knowledge that they have, that unit that we had last year. I have policy here just because I think policy doesn't often find its way into these conversations. Yet we're the ones that advocated for, as mentioned earlier, for ethnic studies in AISD and won it for our district. And we're also involved in the State Board of Education. And there were 3 of us today that participated in House Bill 1504 that are from Academia Cuautli. And so it's kind of like disrupting that idea that, you know, that policy is separate from and really, you know, always implicated in everything that we do. Partnerships are huge. I've mentioned Educator pathways. This is an MOU. We call it an interlocal here, and it's an agreement, a signed agreement by the city of Austin, the mayor, because the Mexican American Culture Center is under Parks and Recreation, which is under the mayor, and also the Austin Independent School District and our humble community, nuestro grupo. We have rotating sets of teachers. We don't want to wear them out. We have 2 coordinators. We have 1 manager. We have the pláticas, as I mentioned, in the summer. That's when a lot of the work happens with the curriculum mapping. It's very organized, right? And it's age appropriate, and it's in English and Spanish. One thing that was interesting about this pandemic was that since we had been working on developing curriculum and now all of a sudden everybody was online, we were able to use our curriculum. Julia Hernandez, who's part of our group, works in the district. And so she just took what we had and made it available district-wide to dual language bilingual teachers throughout the whole district. So now we're talking about systemic impacts. We've also prepared over 200 teachers in the curriculum. We find that it takes 2 years. The first year, maybe as an Academia Cuautli teacher, to learn about the curriculum and the pedagogy, and then to implement it by the 2nd or 3rd year in their actual classrooms. And there's research that we're doing. It's our research site as well. The word for it is a research practice partnership in our worlds in education. Our official partners are nuestro Grupo, that's our community-based organization. What I didn't mention is one practice we have. We meet every Wednesday. Actually, ever since we had that wonderful event on September 20th, 2013 with Armando Rendon and with Oralia Garza de Cortez, we've been meeting on Wednesdays ever since. And so, yeah, it's just part of our practice. And there's volunteers from the College of Education, my department, in policy, and also from the Department of Curriculum Instruction. And people cycle in and out. It just depends. We have undergraduates, masters, and but mostly doctoral students. And so we become a pathway into the doctoral program. We probably have graduated, maybe 3 or 4 doctoral and master students since the inception of our program, and various, probably more, but we have more in process. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. It takes a while to grow a doctoral, a Ph.D. student. And so we become a site that is nurturing to our students and where I can advise them regularly, which is really helpful as a professor. Our other partner, of course, is the district. The district provides the money that we need through Title I and Title III grants for paying the teachers. When we had like buses for materials for the breakfast, and then we raise money on our own. Other partners are the Austin area Association for Bilingual Education, UT Austin, the Indigenous Cultures Institute in San Marcos. Grupo Xochipilli is the danza mexica group that comes in the spring to offer the danza. Although we had to go remote, it was nuanced. It was different this year. And in El Cónsul Mexicano de Austin have been just wonderful in providing us with books and resources. The teachers also came up with their own mission statement. I just think it's their voice, so it's nice to share with this audience. Academia Cuautli empowers teachers and students to formulate cultural identity so that we feel primed to take action. When we see injustice and the need for change, we provide a safe space for students to express empathy and make meaning through a multicultural and biliterate movimiento de aprendizaje. So that's our teachers saying. Now, I don't know if this is going to play, but I do have this in what I mentioned earlier was Ematenayuca, and this was an incident that happened after break when they had read Emma Tenayuca, her personal story, a children's book. It was beautiful. Mr. Manuel Martinez was just a wonderful teacher. After break, he was giving students dulces. And I actually wrote an article on this. And so half of the class was getting the dulces, only because, that was when they came into the classroom and not because that was his intention. But the girls that you see at the front and the children that are in the front part of the image, they were realizing that they hadn't gotten any Reese's Pieces yet. And so so they came in wondering like why the other half of the class got Reese's Pieces and they didn't. And so he the master teacher that he is said, well, what do you know to do when there's an injustice? And so I don't know if this will play, but it would make Emma Tenayuca proud. I think you're not going to see this. So I'm imagining you're not seeing that, but we had an insurrection in the classroom. Is what happened, and it was so wonderful. The girls in the front, they picked up the the sign and the Academia Cuautli sign, and they were like on the picket line, and they were striking. So it was just so heartening and wonderful to see that they immediately embraced the instruction and took us to task. So I'm so glad that I caught that moment. But I'll open it up to questions. I know that I took more time than I wanted to, but it was important to provide, I think, some of the detail about our pedagogy and our practice, to suggest that it's not just a curriculum. I think is really important, and that it definitely is a pedagogy. That it involves teaching, involves epistemic ways of knowing that. That I mentioned that are necessary and important to the ethnic studies classroom. So I'll just stop there. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Are you inspired or encouraged to set up your own escuelita?
Kamati, Dr. Valenzuela. This is Laura over here in San Antonio. It's good to reconnect with you. I guess one of my questions, because part of the, I know what you've always been an advocate for public schooling, and I know that with like the emergence of like a lot of charter schools that are kind of following the same like cultural models, right? Like, do you have any like recommendations for folks like looking to build escuelitas around Central Texas? Like, what route? Like, I mean, I know your stance on charter schools personally, but I guess like how did you choose your partners?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what you have to know is that I administered some grants related to NELRAP. And so what we did in Austin was what we were trying to do around the country, right? And there's a whole story there that's associated with that. We had a Ford Foundation, Kellogg Foundation grant. And so the idea was to create partnerships. And so including there in Arizona. It now does have a Grow Your Own program there in Tucson. And so in the book, Growing Critically Conscious Teachers, you can read about what that work has entailed and what our intention was. And it took us years to get a sense of what we needed to do to address at that point the teacher shortage crisis. But in the background was also, of course, the curriculum and pedagogy pieces that I talked about. And it was, I remember it was at a Ford Foundation meeting, Sonia Nieto said, well, we need to grow our own teachers, right? We need to cultivate our own teachers. And so, what I think the charter schools and I think every case can be different, but for me, the public school is like an easier terrain because you have a school board, and we had to, like actually defend before the school board. But before we did that, we had a champion within the Austin Independent School District. She happened to be Pauline Dow, Dr. Pauline Dow. She was the chief academic officer at that time. Some of you may know her. She was a superintendent, I think, in Northeast ISD there in San Antonio. And so I was finishing up the book, and she and I had come together, and like, what can we do together was the spirit of, we already were friends, we were colleagues. And so I said, well, this is what NELRAP is advocating for. Why don't we make a go of it? And she said, yeah, let's do this. So she could handle the technical part. So you need a champion within the district, okay? You need a champion within the district. You need a champion within, I guess the school, or the company, I don't know, the charter school company. You need champions, because you're on the outside, and you need people on the inside who will say yes. And what we'll do in the summer is we will apply for Title I and Title III monies, so that some of those monies come to you, because the community that you're serving meets those requirements, right? They're English language learners, they're attending low-income schools, and so they have to apply every year. Regardless, and those monies go to vendors who do different things, and so this is a good investment, right? You went to an escuelita in Laredo. I'm not even seeing the comments here, Norma. That's awesome. But the more organic, I would say, that's why it's important. Oh, the other thing I didn't talk about is the third space, and Zeichner also talks about the third space. Other people do too, right? We know Homie Baba. I think Emma Perez, the decolonial imaginary, right? And there's a lot of people writing in this area that it's not school, because they're iterative of their own discourses and values, right? And it's not university, because they're iterative of their own discourses and values, and oftentimes both of them are like not really community centered. They're school centered, they're district centered, they're university centered. So where's the community, right? So that's the value of the third space, that's separate from, I'm not saying don't do this in any school context, and I advocate that it needs to be done everywhere. But I think to be true to what Zeichner and others are saying, to move in that direction, he calls it Education 3.0. He even is predicting that we're going to see the end of teacher preparation programs. Others are saying that too. Because it's being taken up by the for-profit sector. There's different, like the New Teacher Project, there's different projects that are out there that think that, that they can just, from a technical perspective, implement something and it'll be good. Again, where's the community? Where are these pedagogies of the home? Where's our elder epistemologies? Well, it's not going to find a home in these spaces if it doesn't come from our communities. We would have never had Danza Mexica if we had started out at UT, or if we had started out in the school district. But because we were at the Mexican American Culture Center, and because we were connected to Maestra Tupina and the Grupo Xochipilli, we were able to make that organic connection, right? And that's the best way to go, because that's what helps contribute to the sustainability. I'm not keeping up with the chat. How can people certified with your program? How can people get certified with your program, again, if they're not already teaching in the district, or make it available to smaller than already exist with the local nonprofits? I think the question is, we don't certify anyone, but we work closely with teachers that are certified. And so those teachers that are certified, they are distinguished on the basis of whether they're novice or expert. And we try to do mentoring within that space by pairing them up. And the way it works out, because we're a community, is that people just come in even when it's not their day to teach, right? They just want to be part of it. They just show up, and if they have the time, right? But we don't want to exhaust them either, because they're actually full-time teachers in their classrooms. And so what we do is we have the year divided into units. Everybody knows what unit they're going to be in charge of. It'll be I believe it's a 3-week or 4-week unit, 3 or 4 week unit, and then they're done, right? And so there's a lot of organizing in the background that makes this happening. Happening in educational leadership programs also, which need to be much more culturally responsive. What is happening? Dr. Aleman, that need to be much more culturally responsive and community-based?
Sorry, you were talking about the for-profit and the for-profit companies and universities that are trying to take over the teacher prep programs. It's happening with that leadership too, rather than universities doing a better job of preparing leaders more broadly, not just principals or superintendents, but leaders in general, to be much more community-based. The for-profits are really taking some of that from universities, which I think we need to push back and learn from the work that you're doing with your academia. That there's things that principals and administrators can do much better to leverage the community-based work that's happening in ways that haven't been done before. So that's kind of what we're trying to do at Trinity, is learn from some of your work and learn from some of others that have done work community-based and train principals to be much more coming from that framework rather than the top-down, hierarchical, male-centric, traditional frameworks of leadership.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you just have to kind of just do it, right? And I think we hesitate a lot because we're afraid to make mistakes. Well, we're going to make mistakes, right? But I think that, again, I really love the indigenous concept of intention. Like, if good people with a good intention come together, you can do wonders. But you have to, build trust, right? And you have to, find ways to do that. The way that has worked for us is through our Floricanto. Every time we get together on Wednesday, someone reads a poem. We meet for an hour and a half, and we spend an hour on the Floricanto almost every Wednesday, just so that you know. And then we have committees, right? So then the work also gets done on the side. We have different committees to do different stuff. We have a graduation committee right now working on the graduation. We're going to deliver, like summer study kits to the kids, and resources, PPE, headsets, things that they need, t-shirts, academia quality t-shirts, gifts, so that they can be taken care of for the summer. Because of COVID, we hardly got a summer break. We were really busy. This community is working class immigrant, many of them undocumented. The challenges were significant with COVID going online. What the district was not aware of necessarily was how inaccessible their website was to our parents. I mean, it assumes what a space bar is. You know what, que es una página, right? Que es una página, right? I mean, stuff that we take for granted. You can't access anything if you don't understand, those basics. And what it meant was that our parents, our teachers were worn out because they were teaching in the daytime. I think we almost lost some teachers. I think we haven't lost a one in these 7 years from education, from teaching. It's important to hug our teachers symbolically and, and literally. We have to support our teachers. That's another thing. And the idea was never, as a community-based organization, for us to do it. The idea was to in time, we devolved the control to the teachers. So then ultimately, it should be the teachers running all of this and having ownership over it. And that's what's happened. And that's what makes it so good. But it took a while, and I kind of like their own, I think, lack of confidence, I guess. And I mean, it's new. We were all kind of just fumbling in the beginning. And I guess, I don't know if they really believed us, that we wanted them to run it, not us. I didn't want to run it. I wanted people who are expert, and who are willing to be part of this journey to run it. And they've told us, the teachers have told us, if it hadn't been for academia quality, they would have left. I mean, those years that we were being raided, our community, it was horrible. I mean, just the testimonials from that time period. We had 2 years that instead of having a teacher retreat, we had sweats. We had to, clean ourselves from the toxic rhetoric that was coming out of, the then president's mouth. And people were re-traumatized. Some of our teachers, they're DACA teachers. They were re-traumatized by what was happening along the U.S.-Mexico border and these policies. So convivios, I mean, that resonates, right? It has a kind of vibration that gathering does not, a social gathering, you know. I mean, just, to the kind of in our own language, in our own terms, come up with concepts that that actually motivate us and inspire us. The latest one was the consejo. So, and that's what Zeichner calls for, is, like having like parents and community be our advisory board, right? And so we just set up the consejo with the parents, right? And I attribute that to Itzel, one of our aides, who just does wonders with the students. She's an extraordinary young person. Isel Garcia, I have a blog, and if you haven't read her writings, she's just extraordinary. And she works very closely with the parents, and so, and with the teachers and with the rest of us, and is able to broker, a lot of it. Alejandro Chiaui Martinez as well is just wonderful in working with the parents. And so we evolved just very organically this concept of a consejo, right? And I mean, like help us by like helping us by telling us what we need to do to help your children, right? And so I know we're going to continue with that. I'm looking forward to kind of what that means as we go forward. But that's really, really neat. I ran into, I mean, here we've been on remote, and I ran into one of our students at HEB the other night. It's amazing how certain simple things can be so exciting. But I recognized her, and I knew her name, and she knew my name. And so here we are in the bread aisle, and she said, Doctora Valenzuela. I said, Chanel. And there was her father, and then the mother. And so, I mean, I had that just that joy of being in the aisle of HEB, and I don't know, we were there for 30-45 minutes, just like just talking about how wonderful Cuautli is, and how they want to continue. They have another one coming up, through the pike, a younger sister. I mean that was just so beautiful. I mean, how long have you been in a conversation in a store? I mean, everybody's like dodging each other, right? When you go to the grocery stores, and it was like packed, and and here we were, pues, gozando de, visitando, just conviviendo. We were conviviendo. It was beautiful. And so, I mean, and they're like amazing people, extraordinary people. And so, I mean, that inspires, it motivates, and, we need to do more. I don't know if there's other questions. What did I elaborate on? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I wish all of you, to find those spaces. And I know San Antonio has just so much wealth, in some ways, I think more than Austin. Here, sometimes it just feels like the plantation, right? It's so segregated, but really we're all in a plantation. It's really just degrees of whiteness, right? That we're addressing, and white supremacy. And it's not good that we are not represented in the curriculum. It's not good that we don't have a state adopted text for Mexican American studies or African American studies. Emilio's going to have one for Mexican American studies. Emilio and Andres Tijerina are going to have one. With Kendall Hunt, it still needs to get adopted. That might be the first one to get adopted. I mean, God, give me a break. What are we? We're in the 21st century. I mean, this colonial matrix of power just like structures thought. It keeps us from imagining alternatives, right? And we have to really push back against that, and imagine alterity. Imagine, like a different kind of a liberating epistemology, right? And it's not to be like us, and I don't want anyone to take that away as like the prescription here. No, it's to open up you and yourselves to your own context, your own epistemologies, your own your own communities, your own histories. Is place-based, and I think that ethnic studies is threatening, actually, in ways that aren't said, which is that it can't be monetized when we think of it in that way. I mean, who's going to make a profit? People are going to try, right? But the day that we lose that, the heart and soul of not just the curriculum, but our values and the pedagogy, is the day that we've lost ethnic studies. It should not be able to be sold. It should not. It has to be created. We're creators. We need to discover that in ourselves and be that change that we seek in the world, as Gandhi once said. Well, y'all have been wonderful. Y'all have been amazing.
That's Kamati. Thank you.
That's Kamati.
Dr. Valenzuela, I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us and for showing us the possibilities and for continuing to encourage us. Thank you on behalf of MAS and Trinity and our many wonderful students. We appreciate you being here. Gracias por su presencia. Y Dania, I'll pass it on to you.
I just wanted to say thank you for everyone, your questions, your comments, your reflections. Dr. Valenzuela, thank you so much for your work. It has been wonderful. I've learned so much. So thank you again all. And nada, if there are any other questions, final questions or comments, they're welcome. If not, thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you soon in another event.
That sounds great. Do support House Bill 1504. Reach out to whoever represents you and support ethnic studies.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. That's Kamati, Dr. Valenzuela.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
So good to see all of you.
Thank you.
I don't want to go. I want to stay comadreando. I want to stay comadreando.
Bueno,
We're like the captains. We're the last ones to leave the ship.
I wanted to say congratulations to Diana for going over there to work with Dr. Valenzuela. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for all of your support.
It's so
Throughout
exciting.
this whole year. It's been a crazy year. You know, applications to grad school as a first gen. It was a nightmare, but I'm so happy with where I landed.
That's right.
Are you gonna join us at Academia Cuautli sometime?
Yes, I would love to. Yes, any chance I get to help out with the kids, fundraise, selling tacos, selling anything I can do. Paletas.
Tenemos a Marta Cotera también.
Yes.
Bambi Cárdenas, y'all know her. Bambi Cárdenas. It's a stellar group. I mean, every year just seems to get better.
It is.
Yeah, so you know, it's I mean, it's really neat to. I mean, you don't need the validation from Ken Zeichner. I don't need that, right? But it's just kind of cool that he's been saying this all along, just because he's so well recognized and he's a big name in the field, and you know, and so I guess I'm finally reading his stuff, and I'm like so happy to read everything he writes, because I'm like, we're doing this. He says we should do this. That's what we're doing. And so that just, you know, like, wow, makes me feel excited. Yeah, we can change the world. We can change the world.
That's right.
I know.
Una escuelita at a time. Huh?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Bueno, pues, buenas noches.
Buenas noches. Muchas gracias.
Buenas
Muchas
noches.
gracias.
Thank you for everything. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, I think that's it. A second. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
Have a good
congrats. I
night.
didn't know you had decided, but
I know. Oh my God. It was such a, I don't know. It was a hard decision, but I know it was the right one, you know?
Yeah.
And I just got a call yesterday from a graduate assistantship at UT Austin, and you know, it's a 2-year. Yeah, I'm gonna be working. It's a secure job for 2 years in the program. So yeah, it just worked out.
That's awesome. It worked out because it was supposed to, because you deserve it. So it's not just magic. So, and the good thing is we get you still in Texas, so you won't be far away. So
exactly.
We'll
yeah.
see.
So thank you. Have a good night.
Bueno, pues. Good night.